Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Have Your Say webinar on our corporate strategy. I'm Juliet Oliver. I'm the General Counsel and an Executive Director at the Solicitors Regulation Authority. And it's great to see so many of you taking part in the session this afternoon. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by two of my colleagues, Liz Rosser, our Executive Director of Resources, and Chris Hanford, our Director of Regulatory Policy. And together we'll talk through our priorities over the coming period and discuss what we've proposed in our corporate strategy consultation. You may be very familiar with how our webinars work, but just in case, just to let you know that we want this session to be as interactive as possible. And we've already had some questions sent in advance, and we'll be picking those up during the course of our conversation. But you can also submit live questions by clicking on the question link below this video. And you can include your name with the questions, but you don't have to. You also have the option to ask questions anonymously. And we'll try and answer your questions as we go through the webinar. The stream will be available on Catch Up, and you can see it in the on-demand page on our website. And so will be the slides and the links to the consultation documents. So feel free to share this as widely as possible with your colleagues. So turning to the first slide, just to let you know, we have just launched our consultation on our new corporate strategy. It is the strategy which is planned to run for the 3-year period from November this year until 2026. And we're looking to get as much input on this from both within and outside of the profession as we possibly can. This is the first of a number of discussions and roundtables and events to help us to do just that. Just to say that we're also consulting on our business plan and budget, which sets out what we plan to deliver and how during the first year of the strategy. As a general point, I would just say that there is quite a lot of continuity in our proposals with our current strategy. Our proposals build on the direction that we set back in 2020, and that direction is stood up pretty well to the huge changes and challenges we've faced over the past 3-year period. We certainly didn't expect the changes we've all seen over the last 3 years, from the Ukraine war, bringing a range of issues for the profession and for us as the regulator, not least the political focus and regulatory changes surrounding economic crime, anti-money laundering and financial sanctions. Also the pandemic and the cost of living crisis, changing dramatically the way in which we work, but also the needs and vulnerabilities of clients. And the range of ethical issues we've seen for the profession, for example, around workplace culture and behaviours, SLAPS cases and appropriate conduct in litigation, climate change, and many others. So while we don't have a crystal ball on what will change over the next period, our strategy aims to equip us with a clear direction, clear priorities for the coming period, whilst allowing us, very importantly, to anticipate change and be agile. So what's new in the strategy? For the first time, we have a mission statement, which is enhancing confidence in legal services. That's really an attempt for us to try to capture in an accessible way what we stand for as an organisation, what all of our many functions are directed towards. And we think that mission statement conveys the wider impact of our work. As the largest regulator in the UK legal sector, we have a key role to play in driving the standards and setting the regulatory framework that supports public and consumer confidence in legal services in the sector as a whole. And that's really important, we think, for access to justice, for the rule of law, and for the reputation and success of the profession and law firms, both domestically and also on the international stage. And that theme of access to justice and also diversity and inclusion in the profession, in the services it provides, and in the way that we regulate, in turn really underpin that trust and confidence, and they're marbled throughout our work. And as you'll see when you look at the strategy consultation, marbled throughout the priorities we've got set out in that. So that overarching mission is supported by 4 strategic priorities, which build on the 3 objectives that we got in our current strategy, and which we're going to be covering in more detail over the next few slides. So turning to the first of the priorities, and the next slide, please. Thank you. This priority we will deliver high professional standards. So that's really, the core, perhaps what you would expect to see, the core of our day job, what we do in setting, upholding and promoting standards for those we regulate, and importantly, doing so in a way that is fair, proportionate and robust. There's lots to talk about here. This is very much, as I said, the core of our work, and I want to bring in Liz and Chris in a moment. But first, just to pick out a couple of the points that this work covers. First of all, to pick up on building on our work so far in the area of anti-money laundering. As I said, there's been a really increased scrutiny on economic crime and anti-money laundering over the past period. This is very much not a victimless crime, and we want to make sure that the legal sector is at the forefront of tackling money laundering. And we also want to be recognised as a leader in the regulation of compliance with anti-money laundering and also financial sanctions. This has been an area of our work which has really expanded over the past 5 years with the significant changes to the money laundering regulations over that period. And in the past year, we've really added to our work on money laundering to work with firms to keep up with the changes in the sanctions regime and to check compliance with financial sanctions, the financial sanctions regime. So that's a kind of key focus for us under this priority going forwards. And I also wanted to mention the Solicitors qualifying exam. We want this to become widely recognised as a valid, reliable and fair assessment that firstly ensures solicitors entering the profession meet and consistently meet the standards of competence required of them. And secondly, opens up access to the profession to aspiring solicitors from every background. Our work on this priority will really have a focus on evaluating the implementation of the assessments, which were first held, I think, 12 or 18 months ago. We kicked off the SQE, and we've had a really good start with 9,000 candidates taking the assessment in that period across 59 countries. So it's been great to see the take up for the exam, and it's been great to see apprentices performing so well in it. We have 21 apprentices now qualified as solicitors through the SQE since it was introduced. And we will also be delivering the SQE in Welsh. So that's another focus of our work, and we'll also be analysing and publishing statistical data and feedback to help candidates and firms make more informed choices around the SQE, for instance, on which training providers to choose or around recruitment. So as I say, I want to bring in my colleagues now, and perhaps first turning to Liz. Liz, I mentioned introducing the SQE in Welsh. And through our current strategy, we've been really working to increase our presence in Wales. And I just wondered if you could just fill us in a little bit on what we've done there, but also where do you see that going in the next 3 years? How do you see that developing?
Yeah, thanks, Julia, and hello, everyone. It's really exciting to be able to boost our presence in Wales, and we do see what we've done today is just a start and more definitely to come. So in terms of our stakeholder engagement, we've now got a head of Welsh Affairs and starting to reach out to all the stakeholders in Wales, and there will be more and more of that over the course of the coming strategy. We've got an office in Wales at the moment. It's quite small. We've only got 4 staff based there, but we're really keen to expand that. And that isn't just for staff working on our Welsh activities, but indeed there's lots of jobs where we're offering to be based in Cardiff as well. So just as an example, I've got 2 finance roles out at the moment for my finance team, and we're offering them in either Birmingham or Cardiff. So hopefully that office will grow and grow. And you've already mentioned, Juliet, the SQE in Welsh, and I think that's going to be a massive achievement and a real milestone for us. So yeah, it's all very exciting.
Thanks very much, Liz. And Chris, the previous slide mentioned a bit about our work on transparency and consumer choice. And I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about that work, which is, really focused on supporting consumers making informed choices and shopping around. But also, how do you see this helping to support our mission to enhance confidence in legal services? What can people expect to see kind of coming down the line for us on this?
Sure, thanks, Juliet. Yeah, well, we know that many people don't have confidence in buying legal services, and in many ways that's not a surprise. This is stuff that people buy rarely and at difficult times in their lives often, but they also are worried that it'll be unaffordable. And research has shown that people actually think it's many legal services are a lot more expensive than they actually are. So we take small businesses, for example. We did some research that showed for many services, they thought that the legal services would cost more than 20% more than they actually do. But also there's something around the legal service just not looking or feeling like anything else that people buy, and that can have an alienating impact. So as you mentioned, our transparency work is really about helping consumers to better understand and engage with legal services and enable them to make good choices about their legal services provider. Competition and Markets Authority have looked twice at this sector and concluded that it's not working brilliantly for consumers at the moment, and lack of information is one of the key barriers for people and has an impact on the confidence they can have in the sector. So we introduced some rules looking at introducing requiring firms to publish price information about the services they offer in 7 areas of law and the types of services that they provide, and also having a digital badge to help people identify regulated firms and know what that means, and information around how people can complain. And we've been evaluating that throughout, introduced in 2018. We're just finalising our 3-year evaluation of that. And there's some positive signs. People are shopping around more than they were, and confidence in legal services have gone up. So hard to say cause and effect, but moving in the right direction. But we think there's more that we can do here. So some of the work that we'll be doing is looking again at those rules and seeing whether they are as focused as they can be. One of the things that we're getting feedback about is that the comparability of price information isn't that good at the moment, and that's hampering people making choices. We need to look at the areas covered. As say, we started with 7. Are they the right areas? Do we need to do more? And we've done some pilot work around review sites and digital comparison tools, which people really like in this sector, particularly reviews. So we are going to see if there's more that we should be doing in those spaces. And we look across other sectors and how it works really well there. As I've said, this sector is different, so we also do a lot of consumer testing, a lot of testing with firms as well, to really understand what people want, how this works for both consumers and firms in this sector as we shape our proposals.
Thanks, Chris. There are a couple of other sort of pointers on that slide under that first priority, which actually there's quite a lot of crossover with some of the other priorities. So we're going to be coming back to the question of improving our enforcement processes, and also to diversity and progression in the legal sector in a little bit. So I'll put a pin in those if I can. But another point that was mentioned under the first priority was continuing competence. But that leads me quite neatly on to the next priority, because that next priority is really around strengthening our risk-based and proactive regulation. So that's really about being able to deliver better regulation through proactive risk-based activity, which is informed by our data, our insights, and our intelligence, really about harnessing our data and also that of others, which is relevant to our work, to improve our ability to identify and address risks and issues, and looking at how we can share that intelligence and share that data with others to help improve the way they work as well. And the reason that I mentioned continuing competence in this respect is because in the first year of the strategy, what we aim to do is to publish our first annual report on the most significant risks for competence across the sector. And that's going to be informed by us using data from about 4 years of complaints in our investigation processes to help inform that work. So that's really, a really huge amount of important information we have about the complaints that come in, where they're based geographically, what areas of law, what the outcomes are in those, to help us, provide a really evidence-rich sort of map of the issues, and that will help us to develop our appropriate regulatory responses to what we see. So really across our work, data, research, horizon scanning, they're all really key elements to make sure we're basing our regulatory approach on the best possible evidence insights. identifying areas where there are higher risks to the public, and so where we need to turn our attention. For example, where we'll carry out our in-depth thematic reviews, which is a program of our work which we have been expanding and we anticipate will increasingly expand in the coming period as we try to increase our proactive work, looking at themes, specific areas of law, capturing best practice, as well as areas where there may be issues or non-compliance. We'll also enhance our money laundering risk assessment model and use that to adapt and calibrate our targeted anti-money laundering inspections and desk-based views. Our data collection, risk profiling and proactive inspections will look both at anti-money laundering and also, as I mentioned earlier, sanctions compliance. And we're currently gathering information about firms outside of the scope of money laundering supervision on financial sanctions risks. And over the coming months, we'll be looking at what more we might need to do to check compliance within that cohort of firms. So a lot of activity here. And perhaps, Chris, I could ask you, our data strategy is clearly going to be important going forwards. What will some of the benefits be to really focusing on this?
Yeah, well, I think data, as you've highlighted, is fundamental to effective and evidence-based decision making. So it underpins everything from our major policy decisions through to our operational process. And in order to make good decisions, we need the best possible data, as well as the ability to do something useful with it. So we really want to focus on what we will use data for and make sure we're collecting the right data and use it in the right way. So this will really help us make better informed and quicker decisions, provide best evidence to inform our development, policy development, as I said. It really helps give a better understanding of the market that we regulate. And as you mentioned, we've developed and put in place a horizon scanning team that are scanning the market to really understand developments that are relevant to us and to consumers of legal services. And it will give us a platform to best use the new technology that's coming through. You know, we all know about AI and data science. It's in the news a lot at the moment. So having good data will really help us maximize the benefits of that and become more efficient and better at what we do through automation. And it'll make it easier hopefully easier for customers to control the data they provide to us a little bit more as well. So really, in terms of benefits for consumers, it will really help us maintain high standards and manage risks, which has a massive benefit to consumers, but also to those that we regulate.
Thanks for that. And I mentioned earlier having an aspiration to be a bit more open with our data and to share it as well. How will this benefit consumers? What's the sort of focus there?
Sorry,
Chris,
so
you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, sorry, having a stuck mute button there. Sorry. Yeah, so I mean, the more the data that we can put out there, the more transparent that we can be. As I say, it really does help people understand what we're doing, show the decisions we're making, understand risks. There are also real benefits to allowing, for example, we get approached quite a lot by tech companies who are looking to develop products that will help consumers, and they're wanting ever more sort of data and being assured of the quality of the data they're getting. So the more that we can put that kind of stuff out there, the more that other people can use it. You know, it's not an easy thing to do. It'll take time and work to get there, but you know, it's a commitment that we've made to move in that direction.
Thanks. And I think just bringing Liz in here now, what are some of the risks and challenges for us as an organisation in taking our data strategy forward? And what do you think are some of the considerations we should have in mind as we approach this?
Yeah, so as Chris said, data is at the heart of what we do, and if we're going to use it in the way you've both described to make those well-informed and timely decisions and target our regulation, then we do need to make sure it is the right data and we're getting the right data to the right people at the right time. So the integrity of that data is absolutely key. Chris touched a little bit on the technological advances. Obviously, with AI coming on stream, there are some opportunities there, and we need to think about how we can use them in our work. But you'll have seen all over the news about the potential risks, and we need to be, you know, at the forefront of thinking through that. When we collect data from the profession, we need to be mindful that actually there's a burden on the profession in providing us with that data. So we need it to be as seamless, as user-friendly as possible. And I guess one of the key and the things that's critical all through that is data security. And that's something that we do take very, very seriously. And in terms of information security, we've got our ISO 27001 accreditation, which I think demonstrates how important that is to us. In terms of the data sharing, Chris talked about some of the opportunities on data sharing. So again, we need to be mindful of our obligations in terms of personal data and sensitive data, and that's something, again, we need to be very aware of. So lots of benefits, but a lot to keep in mind as we go on that journey.
Thanks, Liz. And yes, new technologies certainly bring in some of those questions and those challenges around data privacy, as well as some of those risks around making sure that we're understanding, you know, what that means in terms of biases and the like. So, you know, lots there for us to make sure we're kind of keeping ahead of, so we can understand and be in a much better position to kind of manage those risks. Which actually very neatly brings me on to the next priority, because that is the priority around supporting innovation and technology. Which is very much a build on what we've got in our current strategy. It really means our focus on keeping up to date with and actively supporting innovation and technology that has the potential to improve legal service delivery and access to justice, and also a real focus on supporting small firms in particular to use technology effectively. So the aims here, we've got a few things that we particularly want to achieve, and one of those is enhancing our SRA Innovate offering. So what we plan to do there is introduce a safe testing environment which can bring together law firms and technology partners to test and develop approaches, innovative approaches or technology-based approaches to improve the delivery of legal services. And also really to continue the work that we've been doing, collaborating with a variety of government, cross-regulator and international initiatives to really work together to help to make sure we can support the adoption of new technologies. And as I said before, really making sure we're kind of up to date with the latest developments, so we can really understand what's happening and make sure that we are au fait. I think just turning to the point raised before about AI, I wonder, Chris, we've heard a lot in the press lately about AI, as you've said, and what role that might play in the future of the delivery of legal services. Has the strategy considered this? What's our approach going to be to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, developing our capability to understand and respond to the emerging opportunities and risks of developing technology is one of the success criteria for us for the corporate strategy. AI is a crucial part of this, and as you've said, it's growing rapidly with sharp increases in the number of firms that are using AI, and even more saying that they intend to use AI in the not too distant future. And as you say, it's really hard to avoid the commentary about the potentially transformative effect of things like ChatGPT. And people have been talking for a long time about there being a sort of revolution in tech, and it looks like it's kind of closer than ever before, certainly. So there can be real benefits to law firms here around efficiency, quality, compliance, and also the way that services are delivered to clients, and obviously real benefits to consumers, where things will be faster, can be cheaper, can be more accessible in certain areas. And we've been active in this space before, and we've got guidance out there about the use of AI. And the easiest thing to remember, I think, is that we recommend that you supervise AI in the same way that you would supervise a trainee that's learning and developing. So the real questions for us is that as the technology changes, is this still appropriate? We have a tech agnostic approach where the firm's responsible for their output, and they can use any technology to do that. But is there more we need to be doing given these advancements? So certainly that's one of the things that we'll be considering during the course of this strategy. And if people aren't aware, there's a government white paper out on regulating AI at the moment, which puts particular onus on potentially a duty on sector specific regulators to introduce different requirements around the regulation of AI, with the idea of it being a pro-innovation strategy, but also manages the risks. And that talks about, you know, things that are already on our radar and will be familiar to you, around safety, transparency and explainability, fairness, you know, governance and accountability, and, you know, contestability and redress when things go wrong. So those sort of government principles that align with kind of where our thinking is anyway. But we really need to sort of work up our strategy on this going forward.
Thanks for that. And I think it's probably worth saying that, you know, other brands of technology are also available, and you know, we put out a risk outlook paper on I think it was in February, on distributed ledger technologies, and some of the opportunities again for those to increase the speed, reduce the cost, increase the sort of effectiveness and efficiency of a whole range of transactions, and obviously particularly in sort of conveyancing space, use of smart contracts, but also the risks and issues for people to look out for, you know, cryptocurrencies, and apart from anything else, the volatility that there might be, but also the potential for anonymity. So there's a whole range of issues there for us to make sure we're kind of addressing in this strategy. But it's also not just all about large scale disruptive technology, is it? I mean, how is the strategy making sure that we can really look at how to support those who are less able to access legal help?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a really good point. And some of the points that you picked up when talking through the slide, we have a really strong focus on our SRA Innovate offering. So where we support firms and any tech companies who are looking to deliver new services or deliver services in different ways, and where there are regulatory questions, how we can support them, and trying to join up across different stakeholders in the environment to do that. And a real focus on small firms. We know that lots of small firms aren't at the stage of using really advanced AI at the moment, but they do want to innovate, and our research has found that they're lacking in some of the skills and the resources to really do that. And, you know, often these firms are providing, you know, services to consumers on the front line in areas that are hard to access. So we have a real focus on supporting small firms. What more can we do there? What guidance and support can we give them? And as you mentioned, we're exploring the idea of a sandbox that would directly put together tech providers and small firms, with a particular focus on services that will help access to justice. We also do quite a few other projects as well. We're doing our third project this year that's using Regulators Pioneer funding from the government to focus on specific access to justice issues and how technology can help with those. And we're doing a collaborative project starting in September, looking at dispute resolution, for example. Last year we did a really good project where we focused on a particular geographical area, so Wales and the Southwest, and we got together a whole bunch of people, academics, law firms, advice centres, both consumers, tried to understand what access to justice issues were and come up with kind of practical solutions for that. And that saw us, for example, develop our deprivation and legal advice tool, which helps map where people really need services and where those services are. And, you know, the Ministry of Justice are really interested in that, who we're speaking to, for example. And also, if anybody hasn't yet looked, then if you look at our Law Tech Insights document we put out, that refers back to some of the where people have got to from our first project, which is called the Legal Access Challenge, which really supported some tech companies and others developing products and services for people who wouldn't ordinarily be able to access them easily. So that's really good to see some of that carrying on and where they've got to.
Thanks. And as you say, fantastic to see what's happened when those projects have you know, where they've gone to. Really great to read those updates. So moving on to the final priority, which is set out on the next slide. Thank you. So this is we will be an authoritative and inclusive organisation, meeting the needs of the public, consumers, those we regulate, and our staff. This one, a bit of a mouthful. Essentially, it really is talking about placing our customers at the heart of everything we do. And, being an authoritative organization which is able to really speak out on the things that matter to us. And I think that's really kind of what's at the heart of that one. The priority is perhaps more internally focused, because it's quite a lot of this is about looking at how we work, our values, and how those translate into what we say and how we say it. So in this one, we really want to review and improve how we communicate, getting customer feedback, and understanding customers' needs, and doing user testing to try and get a sense check on how we communicate, how people engage with us. That's going to be really central to this work going forward. So there's going to be quite a lot of work in this space. Also, I wanted to come back on the point that as I said, I sort of picked up from an earlier slide, which is around our continuous improvement program. So the aim here is to deliver a continuous improvement program that really results in better processes. And we aim to have set revised measures for the timeliness and quality of our decision making, and also to be consistently meeting those. This picks up on something we've already been doing that's already in train around continuous improvement in our enforcement work. We've made really good progress on reducing the time it takes us to investigate cases, but we know we can do more, particularly on those complex cases that require a long period of investigation and prosecution before the Solicitors Disciplinary Tribunal. Investigations are stressful for both the complainant, those under investigation, witnesses in our proceedings, and so it's really important that we take forward and we drive forward improvements, many of which we've already identified, and we have a big focus over the coming period on embedding and tracking those improvements, but also looking out for further improvements we can make, and we can and we should be making as we go forwards. So that's something that's really important to us, and that's a key focus under this priority. We also want to be acknowledged for our own inclusivity, our responsible environmental management and customer service through accredited benchmarking. So as I said, I wanted to pick up the point about diversity and progression, both for us and in the profession. We are a diverse organisation, but we have a plan. We have a real objective here to reduce our ethnicity and our gender pay gaps. And one of the things that we recognised in publishing our ethnicity pay gap is that we have some way to go in terms of representation, particularly in terms of ethnicity at more senior levels in the organisation. So I wanted to bring in Liz here. You're talking about progressing diversity at the top of the SRA. What are we doing to make sure we're making a change in this space?
Absolutely, thanks, Juliet. Yeah, this is obviously critical, and you're right, it is particularly in those senior roles, and so that's what we've developed the action plan to look at. We published it last year, and one of the things we did as part of that action plan is we set 5- and 10-year targets. And I think having those ambitious and having the targets actually there really focuses the mind and focuses the activity. So we're very keen to have those clear targets. What we've done is we've got the action plan focused around 2 key areas, and they're the areas we think will have the biggest impact. So one is around recruitment and the other is around career development. And there's activities grouped under each of those. Some of the things we've done since we published the plan last year is we've run some mentoring schemes, and inter-organisational mentoring scheme we've been a part of. But it also internally, we've just piloted a reverse mentoring scheme. And I know, Juliet, you and I have really enjoyed being a part of that pilot, and we're going to roll that out more widely now. So I think that's been really good. We've committed to diverse panels for senior recruitment, and we're going to include targets around ethnicity at each stage of the recruitment. So the application, the shortlisting and the interview stage, again, to drive that ambition. There's more in our action plan. That's just a few snippets. And as I say, it's on the website. we now publish our ethnicity pay gap every year, and it will be published with our gender pay in the autumn, and so you'll be able to see how we're doing against those targets.
Thanks, Liz. And Chris, looking at quality, diversity, inclusion, and in terms of our plans for the profession, what are we focusing on, and where do we hope the sector will be by the end of this strategy? What's our aim here?
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, I think the profession is moving in the right direction, and we're seeing a more diverse profession overall. But there's much more that we and others need to do to tackle the barriers that are holding the profession back from being truly inclusive. So we know that there are challenges like many other professions, and some of these are driven by societal issues which can take time to change. But we'd like to see a faster pace of change for the profession, and particularly in the larger firms. So through the work we have set out in the corporate strategy, we're hoping that by the end of the strategy, we'll be closing to see a profession that's where there is wider access to the profession for talented aspiring solicitors from all backgrounds, where there is greater diversity and inclusion at senior levels in the profession, and we're going to put particular focus on larger law firms, and where all solicitors have access to an appropriate workplace environment, where everyone is treated fairly and with respect, and bullying, harassment and discrimination is dealt with appropriately. And we recently changed our rules and put out some guidance around that. So that's kind of some of the areas that we're focusing on. You've mentioned that the SQE and the role we think that can play, and the more flexible ways that of training that are possible. We have got two bits of research out at the moment, which we think will really sort of inform our work and action plans going forward and allow us to collaborate more widely. So as mentioned, one of those around the attainment gap for people from less diverse backgrounds, and also around the overrepresentation in reports to us, and also in our enforcement processes for people from Black, Asian and minority groups. So we'll be publishing that research in the future, and then we'll build action plans on that.
Thanks, Chris. And I think under the course of the current strategy, we've also really seen a greater prominence around the environment and climate change. We've had a number of questions on this theme, making the really important point around the urgency of the issues, and looking for more detail on our plans. The questions have really asked about the work that we're doing internally. I've sort of grouping them together because, as I say, we've had a number, but they touch on what we're doing internally, in particular sustainability targets and deliverables to demonstrate progress, but also how our work will support the sector with their sustainability goals. What we're thinking about perhaps regulations on advising clients about the climate crisis, how we would approach, and this is perhaps a generic question that kind of cuts across a number of different areas, but it's particularly pertinent to climate change, how we would approach the position where solicitors are asked by clients to do something that's legally permissible, but perhaps which will contribute to causing harm or might be considered to be unethical in some ways. These are all really excellent questions, and I think that the need for the SRA to really grapple with the issues surrounding climate change, to set out a clear position for the sector. These are all things that have been discussed by our board, and we know that we're planning to focus on them in the strategy going forwards. But as I say, they cover both the internal SRA position, but also what we're saying externally for the profession. Perhaps, Liz, can I ask you a little bit about to give us a bit of an update on our environmental management approach internally first, perhaps?
Yeah, thanks. So internally, we're accredited. We've got our ISO 14001 environmental accreditation. We take that very seriously, and we've had very positive feedback on that accreditation. And so as part of that, clearly, we've set targets around energy usage, travel, paper usage, etc. We've reduced our floor plate, our footprint in the queue. We've reduced by a floor, so that's had savings. And we've done things like when we refurbished, we won an award for our environmental approach to refurbishment. We've reduced our the lighting in the cube. You know, we've really thought very hard about that. We've got an active staff network, which is our internal green living community, that I think we've got over around 300 of our staff are members of that. So again, it's obviously such a critical issue. It's something that we all feel strongly about, and it's great to see those tips and that drive internally to keep improving in that area. We haven't yet set a target around net zero beyond the statutory requirements, but we are actively considering that at the moment. And I think that point about our leadership role and where we go, that's something that absolutely we'll be looking at in the very near future.
Thanks, Liz. And I think, you know, in terms of the position for the profession, I mean, we know that there's some really great guidance that the Law Society have put out recently, which I think provides quite a lot of support for the profession in terms of understanding the issues and how they might approach their role, how to understand and perhaps you know, address the risks and opportunities and the goals that they might have as an organisation and of their clients. And we did work with the Law Society as they were developing that guidance. But I think, you know, it is true to say that we're really clear that we need to, in the coming period, set out a position statement on regulatory expectations in relation to climate change. You know, that's something that's absolutely, you know, for us to set some clarity around. And we have made a commitment in the business plan for the first year of the current of the next strategy to do that. I think in terms of the content of that, I mean, that's of course got to be discussed and agreed with our board. But as I say, I think what we recognise is it's going to need to clarify our role, and it's going to need to deal with some of those really quite difficult issues and questions. So, you know, the question of balancing the public interest in access to advice and representation, particularly where that advice is around helping people understand and mitigate the risks of harms and the like, but also with the fact that we know that just because something is lawful, it doesn't mean that it's right to do it. So, you know, our regulatory framework does require solicitors to act in the public interest and in the interest of consumers more widely, and to promote public confidence in the profession. And those obligations take precedence over the interests of a client. So, you know, there will be a need to actually think, you know, it may be legally permissible what my client has asked me to do, but is it actually the right thing to do? Is it in the public interest? And, you know, where is the line drawn, perhaps when it comes to things like, you know, what client onboarding and what instructions it's right to take on. So I think that is a really difficult question, one we're going to need to grapple with. We're also going to need to, I think, look at what competence looks like in terms of climate conscious lawyering, and also perhaps things around reporting, whether we should be setting out best practice or even minimum disclosure requirements to help consumers choose on the basis of ESG credentials, help in-house teams use their buying power to drive change when they're appointing legal panels. So there's a bunch of issues there that we're going to need to think through, and in doing that, we want to draw on the work we've already done and the engagement we've already carried out and the data we already have, but we really are going to need to engage further with stakeholders over the coming period to try and help to work through those, as I say, rather knotty issues for both us and the profession. So, you know, anybody who's on this call who might want to help and help us develop our thinking there, who's interested in taking part in this work, please do let us know. So I think moving on to the next slide, if I can. This is really to, as a reminder, I mentioned earlier, we're also consulting on the business plan and budget for the first year of the strategy. And that's the year that runs from November this year. And the business plan will detail how we're going to work to deliver the 4 priorities, what we're going to be focusing on, particularly in year 1. And in terms of the budget, this includes our element of the practicing certificate fee. bearing in mind that the fee is made up of many parts. The fee that is paid funds 6 different organisations, the 2 largest, us and the Law Society. And we're consulting separately on our element of the practicing certificate fee, and feedback from that and the Law Society's consultation are going to be used jointly to set the 2023-24 PC fee level. So that's just a reminder of what that consultation really is about. But Liz, perhaps I could ask you, what are we proposing in the consultation for the next business year?
Yeah, thanks, Juliet. So yeah, on that point, it's probably worth saying that our fee represents probably it's usually around the 53% of the total. Obviously, we don't know exactly where the others will land, but it just gives an indication of where this will sit in the overall. So I think the first thing to say is that we've had a really sharp focus on budgetary cost control and delivering value for money over the last few years. You'll see that you'll probably notice that the individual PC fee has only actually gone up by around £3 in the last 6 years. And despite that, we've managed to absorb new activity and obviously the inflationary increases over that time. But as it says there are demands on us now which just mean that that's just not sustainable moving forward. And so partly because of the obviously high inflation that's impacting everyone, but also the requirements on us for additional work from our regulator and from policymakers, for example, the anti-money laundering. And of course, the new things that we've set out in our strategy that we want to take on and we want to do. So all of that means that we are proposing an increase in our fees. And what we're proposing is that the individual practicing certificate fee rises by £11 to £162. So that's the SRA proportion of it. We have set some longer term in our strategy. We've set some longer term intentions just to hopefully give individuals and firms some sort of security about what's coming. And what we've committed to is that any increases will be absolutely capped in years 2 and 3 to a maximum of inflation plus 2%. That would be the worst case, and we actually seek to come in under that. So that's the overall sort of picture over the 3 years. The compensation fund, which is the contribution that comes at the same time as the PC fee, for individuals will be the £30 and a small decrease for firms. So overall, what that means is an increase of £11 on the individual combined fee, and that's about 6% overall. So although our total budget requirement is higher than that, once you've done spread it across a number of solicitors, it's a 6% increase. We do recognise that in the current climate that will have an impact on individuals and firms. So really just to reassure that we will absolutely keep this as low as we possibly can, and that we're constantly looking for ways to drive efficiency, control our costs and deliver value. So it's always very much on our radar.
Thanks, Liz. So we've had no questions coming in on the chat so far, but I think that's either because we've just covered everything so comprehensively, or people are, keeping their powder dry and they're going to come in and respond to our consultation with all of their thoughts and their issues. So I think on that basis, the next slide is just a reminder of where you can find those and the deadlines. So 21st of June is the deadline for the business plan and budget consultation. That timeline really aligns with when we need to get decisions through together with the Law Society. And on the corporate strategy, a little bit of a longer timeline through to the 2nd of August to respond. And following the consultation, we're going to be publishing a summary of responses and an updated final business plan and budget in the autumn. So I'm just trying to see if there's any other questions that have come in. I appreciate that we're actually quite close to time. Just somebody saying they're interested in helping us develop our position on climate change. Fantastic. So we'll be able to come back to you and make sure we can take that conversation forward. I'm really grateful for that feedback. So I think on that basis, perhaps wrapping up this session, just to thank Liz and Chris very much for your thoughts and your insights and walking through those priorities with me. We hope you found this webinar and discussion useful, and we would really like to hear your feedback. Do please look at the consultation documents. Do please tell us what you think, and also tell us what you've thought of this session. You can click through. There's a feedback form below the video. It only takes a minute. It really helps us to improve what we do and how we run these sessions. So it's incredibly valuable to us. So as I said, please respond to the consultations. Until then, thanks again to everybody and have a good afternoon.